This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Today, Asara B'Teves, is the day that Nebuchadnezzar surrounded the walls of Yerushalayim in the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, and which ultimately led to the siege of Yerushalayim and the eventual downfall of the Beis Hamikdash and the exile of Klal Yisrael. And the Chassam Sofer, it is well known, teaches us that every year on Asara B'Teves, Hashem revisits whether the process of Churban will continue for this coming year. But I'd like to share with you really a revelation of two historic events that occurred on Asara B'Teves, not just historic, but events that occur in the times of the Chumash. One we've discussed in the past, and one is brand new. Let's start with the tremendous chiddush of the Sefer Pnei Ari Zuti. This is a Sefer published about 300 years ago. I want to thank my friend Rafal in France who sent this to my attention. The Pnei Ari Zuti makes the following cheshbon. Based on the Mechilta, when did Yaakov Avinu arrive in Mitzrayim? The Mechilta says he arrived on Tesvav Nisan, on Pesach, because the Jewish people were redeemed 210 years to the day from when they arrived. So Yaakov arrived, and then 210 years later, they were redeemed. Fine. Now, how long did it take him to get from Eretz Yisrael to Mitzrayim? We know from Eretz Yisrael to Mitzrayim is 400 Parsha. 400 Parsha. How do we know that? It says that when Yehuda cried out, when he was sha'ag in the palace of Yosef, it traveled 400 Parsha to Eretz Yisrael. So from Eretz Yisrael to Mitzrayim, it's a distance of 400 Parsha. How far could a person travel in one day? 10 Parsha. So 400 Parsha takes 40 days to travel. But they had to go get Yaakov, they had to go get him. So they traveled 40 days to Eretz Yisrael, and then he came from Eretz Yisrael to Mitzrayim, 40 days, a total of 80 days. He arrived on Pesach. What's 80 days before Tesvav Nisan? Well, you can't travel on Shabbos. Says the Pnei Ari Zuti, 80 days before Tesvav Nisan is Asara B'Teves. Then, wait a second. If they left 80 days before Nisan, before Tesvav Nisan, that means they left on the day that Yosef revealed himself to his brothers. So says the Pnei Ari Zuti, when did Yosef reveal himself to his brothers? When did Yosef say, Ani Yosef ha'oid avichai? Today, Asara B'Teves. So when I read this, I recognized that this was actually quite remarkable and compelling, because there's another chiddush in the Sefer Beis Yishai of Rav Fisher, who also bothered by a question that all the fast days are rooted in events that occurred in the Chumash. Tisha B'Av, we fast for the Churban, but it was also a day of crying from time immemorial back to the Chet of the Meraglim. And Shavasar B'Tammuz dates back to the Egel. So what is the Shoresh of Asara B'Teves? So says the Beis Yishai, that with somewhat of an asmachta, because we know the mazel of Teves is Gedi, he suggests that Mechiras Yosef occurred on Asara B'Teves. And therefore it comes out that all the fast days are rooted in tragedies that have occurred in the times of the Chumash. So Shavasar B'Tammuz is the Chet HaEgel, and Tisha B'Av is the Chet of the Meraglim, and Asara B'Teves is the Chet of Mechiras Yosef. In fact, a friend of mine, Rabbi Yosef Deutscher, once pointed out in the slichos that we say on Asara B'Teves, we reference the words taroif taraf. Also, that is the words used in the context of Mechiras Yosef. But putting together the Pnei Ari Zuti together with the Beis Yishai comes out remarkable. Because Asara B'Teves is the day of Mechiras Yosef, and Asara B'Teves is also the day of the revelation of Yosef, because Yosef was sold for 22 years to the date. Asara B'Teves to Asara B'Teves. On Asara B'Teves, Yosef went down to Mitzrayim, and Asara B'Teves came the great redemption of Yosef revealing himself to the brothers, and saying the Avelis is over, and my father's mourning is over, and now it's time to come back, and everyone joined together. And the Beis Yosef writes that the union of all the brothers in Mitzrayim with Yosef was a fruition of Mekabetz Nidchei Ama Yisrael. In fact, the Beis Yosef brings that the bracha of Tekabeh Shofar Gadol Cheruseinu V'Sanes Tekabetz Gil Yosenu is a reference to the collection and the gathering of all the brothers and Yaakov Avinu in Mitzrayim, that was a fruition of Mekabetz Nidchei Amo Yisrael. So too we could say, Asar B'Teves is the day of tragedy, the day of Mechiras Yosef, but it's also a day of redemption, it's the day of the Hisgalos of Yosef. And as the Chassam Sofer teaches us, every year Hashem decides on Asar B'Teves, will there be a process of Churban this year? So, the Rebbe Shem could decide, yes, in fact, this year there will be a process of Churban. It could be the days of Avelos may continue. It's a day of Mechiras Yosef. On the other hand, it's also the day of the revelation of Yosef, and it has the potential for the Rebbe Shem to put an end to the cycle, the downward spiral of Churban. So may we be Zoicha that in today should not be a day of Mechiras Yosef, but rather a day of the revelation of Yosef and the union of all Achenu B'nei Yisrael, Me'arba Kanfos Ha'aretz, and we should be Zoicha to see Tzoim Ha'asiri Yiyeh L'Beis Yehuda L'Sasoin U'L'Simcha U'L'Mayadim Tovim.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.